As I came in, I was hearing some of the discussion, and so I wanted to comment just overall on two of the aspects that we're discussing. The online community college, I think I would echo my colleagues' comments in terms of looking for evidence. Having served on a K through school board, I also know that rollout and implementation is a whole other thing, no matter what the trend is doing, and particularly for exactly the 2.5 million people that we're trying to reach. In a time where over the last 12 months, we've still talked about some communities not even having full needed access to internet. I think of how many people of the 2.5 are in those exact same communities where we have the issues that they still don't have full access, especially in rural California. And so I think that there's a lot of elements, but I too am looking for evidence that this is the right investment at this particular time. I think we need creativity, and I think there's reasons to be creative and to think about how we're going to reach a hard-to-reach population. But I also think that there are some tools in place and some investments. If I look at the community college and I look at the funding, there's been multiple investments made to different types of programs, not all online, that are targeted to reach some of our harder-to-reach students. And so I think of, how do we weigh that out? But I do think that that evidence is going to be important for at least me to better understand if this is the right investment at this particular moment in time. If it's something that we should consider, in other forms of looking at what's already in place and doing further expansion and investing there, or really starting a whole new brand new online college. On the front related to the UC funding, I want to be sure that the student voice and narrative is not lost in this. And so I think about the fact, there was mention about, the governor's 3% is more than 2.5, but it's not the 4%. And I also think about something that has become very real in the life of students, and that is that the landscape in higher ed is changing at a time where we are also thinking about what impacts and changes we may see from the federal government with student support programs, Title IX, the Pell Grant, 15 units versus 12 units. I think of the fact that our students in California are not just thinking about whether this is 1 year of tuition increase and more of a how much impact can they take in the coming year. And I would like to know just how we incorporate that, what the governor's thinking in terms of there may actually be other cuts. And if we're increasing tuition in a time where we may be telling students that, 12 units has been considered full-time for purposes of financial aid, but we may up that on you to 15. It's going to mean that they are going to pay more in tuition, have to work more hours, not be able to work as many hours because they now have to take the 3-unit difference in quarter, in schools that run on a quarter system is a whole other class. How does that incorporate into all of this, and how do we make sure that we at least consider a stopgap in a year where there may be other federal impacts?
So I think it's difficult, from our perspective, it's difficult at best to predict what this federal administration will move forward with at any given moment. And I think, we understand your concern, certainly, but it's very difficult to say what the federal government will or won't do at this point. So it'd be premature for the state to take action based on what it doesn't know about what the federal government will be moving forward with. It's a very difficult position, but we certainly recognize that we need to monitor it. We need to keep close eye on what the federal government ultimately moves forward with and take appropriate action as the specific information becomes very clear to the state. But until that point in time, I think, from our perspective, it'd be premature to assume what the federal government will or won't do.
Well, and I appreciate that, but I do want to note that these are very specific items that have been shared with the public in terms of the direction that the federal government may be going. And I also want to, knowing our process, have something in place that we have a means to correct that if need be. And so I want to be sure that as this, budget moves forward, that if there is a trigger, what is that trigger going to look like to recorrect anything that may happen? Because in the life of a student, to wait an entire academic year, the very goal of helping students reach time to degree may be impacted by saying, hey, this was with a budget, we really can't deal with this until another year, when some of these changes can be really, detrimental to the life of a student, not just in terms of getting into a UC, but graduating from a UC and also being successful. I hope that there's some thought in terms of what would trigger a remedy for students if some of this were to happen, and in light of the conversations between 2.5 to 3% to 4%.